C-D-E-F-G, gummy bears are chasing me. The relentless
pursuit
of whatever
works
in the life of a child.
Welcome to Fostering Futures with CAHELP, a podcast dedicated to our relentless pursuit of whatever works in the life of a child. I'm your host, Athena Cordero, inviting you to join me and countless others as we share our unique perspectives and expertise in the world of special education, behavioral health, social-emotional well-being, and community. Follow us on Buzzsprout, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Welcome to Fostering Futures, everyone. I'm Athena Cordero, and today we have Renee Castillo. She is the Director of Child Welfare and Attendance with Apple Valley Unified School District. And Renee, how long have you been with Apple Valley?
Well, I worked in education for about 27 years now. I started as a teacher with Apple Valley Unified School District, and then around 2012 or 13, I went into a similar position of wasn't called Child Welfare and Attendance at the time, but covered some of the same areas. And then went to Rio Vista as an assistant principal. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Vermont for 3 years. Yeah, it was great. And there I was a principal of a school ironically named Barstow Elementary School. That is ironic. Then we decided, I had a great experience there, and the education system there is very different.
Yeah.
But I brought back a lot of skill, especially around social, emotional well-being for kids and dealing with students with challenging behaviors. And so when I returned to the district in 2018, I was the coordinator of student services.
Okay.
And we also brought in some BCBA and behavior management at that time. And then promoted to director of student services. And then when our child welfare and attendance person retired, I moved back into this position as a director.
Nice.
So I've been with the district or within education for about 27 years now.
So I have to ask, because I had no idea you lived in Vermont for 3 years. What do you think, and I know it's probably hard to answer, but what's one of the biggest differences you probably seen in education in Vermont versus here in California?
They are a lot less litigious.
Okay. Give me an example.
There are not so many legal requirements kind of restricting what you're allowed to do.
Okay.
The students, they really incorporate the outdoors in everything. Their PE, their lifestyle. They are very outdoorsy people, and they allow, like, we had an outdoor classroom that was down by a stream that students could be outside for hours doing their writing and language arts work, or for PE we were able to go skiing and snowshoeing and rock climbing, and that wouldn't happen out here just because of all the legality around
yeah, you're right.
Students potentially getting hurt. So there was that, as well as our special education was all inclusion. So our special educators would go into the classroom and support students that way. And that's really where I learned a lot about zones of regulation and social emotional regulation with students through the amazing behavior support person that worked at our school.
Yeah.
And so I took that knowledge and how they addressed behavior and brought that back with me. And we've been trying to implement some of those practices into what we do to support students in Apple Valley.
That's so interesting because especially in a time where technology, social media kind of takes over if you let it, to have a school setting where you can get closer to nature outside, I can't even imagine, what kind of impact that must have on student learning. I'm sure it's an amazing impact, but I want to see it, just to see what it looks like for them.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was the kids out there are truly blessed to be able to have those opportunities.
That's awesome. And I'm a little jealous, I think, right now. Yeah, just a tiny bit. Okay. So I could probably ask you 1,000 more questions about Vermont, but we won't do that. We really wanted to talk about child welfare and attendance today. We're going to look at how maybe our foster youth, what the experience might be like for them. But I do want to know more about it, and just kind of give a broad understanding of what it is, and then maybe narrow down just a little bit. Okay.
Sure.
So first off, why is it that child welfare and attendance impacts student outcomes so much? Like, what is the impact that has on student learning, student outcomes?
Well, I think the focus of our department is basically to maintain a supportive access to school and to make sure that the students' overall well-being is taken care of. So we do that through like safety with, supporting school sites with any disciplinary measures. Our office in general will take like more formal bullying complaints where if, parents are feeling that maybe it wasn't handled at the school site, which most often it is handled, but sometimes it doesn't stop, or maybe it needs another set of eyes to do some investigation.
Right.
We do that at a more formal level through our district or through our department. And then for attendance, I oversee enrollment, and I'm in communication with the school sites and the principals regarding truancy and chronic absenteeism. And then I do wellness checks with our nurses and our district police department. We will go to homes, and if we haven't had eyes on students in a while, we want to make that connection. Then we want to have a discussion about what those barriers are, and see how we can help to get the students back in school. And then, like, kind of last resort, we have our SARB process, our truancy and SARB process, which if, we've tried everything else to improve attendance and work with families, if we just can't seem to get that attendance improved, we'll go ahead and follow the SARB process.
So you mentioned barriers that could be preventing students from attending school, right? When it comes to foster youth, are there different, I would imagine, barriers, for our foster kiddos when it comes to attendance?
Yeah, sometimes they overlap with just the general population, but yeah, a lot of times they'll have high absentee rate due to maybe a change in placement, or to sometimes they have mandated appointments, either court appearances, doctor's appointments, counseling, visits. And so we have really no control over those things. So those students might experience that. And then they'll also have kind of not only the physical absence, but the emotional or the engagement piece of being in the classroom. And a lot of times that stems from their trauma.
Yeah.
That's a trauma response. Sometimes they're not intentionally trying to not pay attention, and it could look like that from the outside in. But, they could very well be kind of scanning their environment for safety because of, what they've experienced prior to coming into school.
That's interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain it as a difference between a physical absence and an emotional absence, really. When I get what you're saying, but you're right. Just being there in person doesn't necessarily mean you're in the moment.
Correct.
And if you've come from, a tough situation, or you have some trauma that you're struggling with, you could absolutely kind of sit there and just zone out. How would, classroom teachers, aides, like, how do you spot that? How do you get ahead of that if a child is there physically, but they're not really there?
I think it depends. Sometimes if the student's been in your classroom, which is another reason why school of origin is so important, because you're maintaining those consistent relationships. If you know a student, you're able to pick up on things, maybe like a change in their mood, that change in their engagement. They might be withdrawing. They might no longer partake in activities that they used to enjoy doing. You may see maybe even some aggressive behavior start to develop. So I think if you have that relationship with a student, you're able to check in with them, make sure everything's okay, make sure they're safe, see if there's anything that they need. And then also, use your other resources that you have at your school site or within your district or even within our community to get a student connected with any supports that they might need.
Yeah. So Thank you for the example. Because what I would like to do, or what I'm trying to do, is imagine myself in the classroom as a teacher. And for the kiddos that have been with me for a bit, and I can kind of point out, their personalities or their habits in class, I feel like that works. Like Athena's a little quiet today, or Renee is acting a little more talkative, than usual, not wanting to pay attention, or, whatever. But if I know that this is a new placement for one of my students, that they're in foster care, I don't know. I don't know what's usual or typical for them. Is there anything that I can do as a teacher to kind of help to check without knowing, I guess, or, anything I can put in place to support that?
I think just trying to make that connection with the student,
Yeah.
getting to know them just on a personal level, like what do they enjoy? What kind of do they enjoy sports? Do they enjoy gaming? What shows do they watch? Do they participate in any activities? Having conversations and getting to know them, and then just checking in, after the weekend. Hey, did you have a baseball game this weekend? How did that go? Just starting to build those relationships,
Yeah.
letting them know that you're a trusting adult that they could come to if they have anything. Because you can imagine being in foster care, the trauma that was behind that, and then all of the people that they don't have a connection with that have really came in to control their lives, right? Like
Yeah.
they've been removed from their family by strangers. They've been placed in a new home with strangers. They're possibly at a new school with strangers. And so being able to trust people is probably very low on the priority list for them right now.
No, definitely.
And so being able to just slowly and being patient, letting them know I'm here for you, if there's anything that you need. And then getting them even connected with other people at your school site is really important. And then over time, even just exploring options like, hey, if you need a break at all, here's something, just let me know, or here's a signal we have, you can take a break. And just letting them, having some compassion.
Yeah. It's also very, similar to the normal classroom setup when you're looking at things in terms of tiers, like what you offer everybody, what you have to offer a few, what you only offer Athena or Renee because of what they need. But those are very practical things, just asking, how was your weekend? Who knows the last time, someone took an interest, even so simple, and what that conversation might, kind of lead to, or the comfort it might lead to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we can do, right? That's something we can all do.
Costs no money.
Right.
It takes 20 seconds.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I love that. You did mention SARB a minute ago, and I want to go back to that because sometimes when folks hear, CWA, child welfare and attendance, they think of compliance or rules or, truancy or things like that because something has happened and now there's some trouble and there's accountability. And that's not necessarily it, because just a second ago you gave, the example about maybe bullying or what children might be experiencing on campus that need a specific department to look further into. And so I do want to talk about the compliance piece a little, but what I'm hearing is that's not the whole story, behind child welfare and attendance. It's not just accountability. But what is the SARB? What does SARB stand for? What is that process?
It's the Student Attendance Review Board.
Okay.
And so like within our district, we have the truancy letters. So they'll receive multiple letters if for unexcused absences, kind of putting it on the radar of the parent, just letting you know that your student has 3 unexcused absences. And so just asking them to work with the school and gives them the name of administration, counselors, and resources at their specific school site that they could reach out to for support if they could be of any help. And then if the attendance still doesn't improve, the schools will do a SART meeting, a student attendance review team meeting.
Okay.
And they'll invite the parent, and that's where they really want to, at the school level, want to speak with the parent, find out what the barriers are, and then utilize whatever resources we have in the district or connections we have within the community. We also have family center coordinators that have very close community connections. And so it's just working with them, hearing what they need and giving them that support to remove those barriers. And then we monitor, and if attendance still doesn't improve and we've pretty much exhausted all the tools in our toolbox, then it has to become a little bit more punitive, and it does go to the SARB panel, which basically is myself, the district attorney, probation, and we talk with the parent and we outline the communication that we've had with them, the attempts to resolve the issues, the supports and resources put into place to remove the barriers, and just outline that, according to law, they are required for their children to be attending school, and they get placed on a formal contract for that.
So, in all honesty, Renee, that sounds intimidating to me.
It is.
Right? It does sound like I'm sitting down with the authorities talking to me about why I can't get my kid or kids in school like they should be. And I know nobody wants to get to that place, right? Especially for you all who have to sit there and outline that for them. And I would imagine some circumstances absolutely look neglectful, and then some circumstances probably look like, wow, they're having a tough time, but we have to do what we have to do. We still have to go over this, right? What are some things that, if you can give me like some specific examples of interventions that you've seen work, where it looks like, a family is right on the border of probably having to go to that more formal process, but it kept the kids, from entering that. Are there any interventions you can share that you've seen that have been really helpful?
I can think of one family in particular that we've worked with over the years. They were struggling under McKinney-Vento, the homeless act, and they were doing the best with what they had.
Right.
Their living situation was probably not one, that anybody would want to be in, but the students' basic needs were being met. They had food, clothing, shelter. They were being cared for in a loving way. And we provided transportation to their school of origin. And we also got them in connection with our family center coordinators and the food pantry. So we made sure that they always had food. They had electricity. They had running water. They had heat. And we just had that communication with the family. I mean, communication is key. And a lot of times when families are in that situation, it's not something they're proud of. They don't always want to share that information,
Right.
which is completely understandable. And that's why those trusting relationships are so important.
Yeah.
This family in particular, our school police found out about their situation and actually asked if he could bring me over, just to show how they were just making use of their resources, not in a way to report them to CPS or anything like that, because homelessness doesn't mean a student's being neglected,
Right.
correct? So in no way were we looking at it from a punitive measure, but to look at how they were just making use of their resources. And so that parent felt that level of trust with us. And so anytime their situation changed or a different need came about, they were willing to communicate with us.
Oh, wow.
And so it really helped us, no matter where they were living, to stay on top of it and make sure their kids had a seamless access to their education and any other resources that they might need.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not that long ago, something not even related to their homeless status or anything occurred, and the students were removed from the home and are now in foster care. But still, the parent maintained the relationship with us and advocated for them to remain at school of origin, even though now they're living in Victorville, in the neighboring city. And through connections that I have through as the foster youth liaison with San Bernardino County, I was able to kind of track and monitor where they were in that process of removal and get in contact with the social worker. And we were able to reach out to the foster family and get transportation set up so they could remain at their school of origin and maintain that level of consistency. Yeah. And their foster family was more than cooperative and has been since.
That, wow, I'm trying to walk myself through that story, right? As you're sharing it with me, and it sounds like somewhere in there, I don't know where, you all were able to take a family that probably didn't trust anybody, and offer them that, and them accepting it they didn't feel like they had been tricked, into, oh, great, now there's this compliance piece and we're going to be punished because we shared so much with you.
Mhm.
It was really looking at it to see how you can help them with the resources they had, make the situation as positive as you could, right, for that family. And of course, things happen, whether they had control over it or not, which kind of hurts more when you think about it, especially when they're trying so hard with what they have. But I mean, at least you were able to keep track and follow them through, and kind of stick it out with them is what it sounds like. Do you, as I'm listening to you talk right now, how do you not take that stuff home with you? And I imagine you do. You have to, right? How do you balance that just for yourself, in this role?
Yeah. It is hard not to take it home or, to spend your weekends thinking about, especially when families are experiencing homelessness, right?
Yeah.
Because your hands are tied as far as what you can you can't help everybody.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a financial situation. Just getting them and knowing that I'm doing everything that I possibly can, exhausting all the resources, getting them in connection with who I think might be able to help them more than I can.
Yeah.
That helps because I know that I'm doing all that I possibly can, but that's within my control. And then I just have my own kind of self-care,
Yeah.
exercising and kind of like a self-meditation and just taking time to make sure that my mental health and physical well-being are taken care of too, and that helps to go back to work and be refreshed. But
Yeah.
even just the success stories, like just knowing that if you set up transportation for a student and they showed up at school, or when their family situation changes, that they call you to tell you, to me that means everything, because that's trust. They a lot of times they don't know me because I'm at the district office. I'm a phone call, or I'm a stranger showing up at their doorstep to check and make sure their child is okay.
Right.
Often getting confused with Child Protective Services,
Right.
because child
Yeah.
welfare and attendance sounds so similar.
Yeah.
So sometimes they see a police officer, that automatically for some families puts up the guard, and then they see a strange lady standing at their door, possibly two if one of the district nurses are with us. And so it's all about how you interact with people, and your like body language, your demeanor, your tone, your facial expressions, how you're standing, all of that kind of stuff plays into a knock at somebody's door. And so I think it's just really important to be aware of all those things, and when a family shows that they're willing to share information with me, with that, even that beginning level of trust, that makes me feel really good, because now I know, like, okay, now we can work together. You're going to trust me that I'm really only here to help you. Even though I'm a stranger. So I always try to encourage even that, like, the principals, they're so busy managing their schools on the day to day and everything that happens. But, if they're able to either come with us or do a home visit first, because, how meaningful is that when a student or a parent answers the door and your principal's standing on your doorstep, right? Or your assistant principal. You care enough to show up at my house.
That would, and again, I'm just thinking about myself, right? If I was in a really tough situation and there's someone at my door that I don't know, it would kind of feel like the law is at my door, right? But if that person was there with my kid's principal, or assistant principal or counselor, whatever, I think I would probably be a little less defensive.
Right.
Because you know my family. So at least if I'm talking, I can look at you going, this, like, you know what's been going on. That would kind of ease me into opening the door a little bit more. I could see that. Okay, so there probably is some misunderstanding on the family's part about what a director of child welfare and attendance is really there to do for them, actually, not to them. Is there anything that you think schools misunderstand, about child attendance or absences, that you wish that they could either look at it a little differently or have the time to look at it a little differently?
Yeah. We work very closely in our school district. I can only speak to my school district. We're not a huge district, so we have that ability. And so we spend a lot of time working one-on-one with each other. So they have a pretty good understanding of my role and how I can assist them in different things.
Okay.
Excuse me. But sorry, I'm a problem.
It's okay. So let's pause for a second, then Jake will be able to find it. You can go ahead, drink. Yeah. And then he can cut all this out. We'll be all right.
Oh, sorry. Was it okay? All right. Which one were we on?
It was about the school's misunderstanding what families deal with attendance challenges. And you were saying that you guys are small enough, you meet one-on-one, they understand your role really well. Okay. That's okay. Do you want me to ask the question again?
Yeah, let me find where I wrote, because I feel like I had some, I can't think right this, okay, for that one. And I'm like, I know I was like, oh, because that one took me a minute.
And I think the way I had it on here is I asked what was one thing schools misunderstand about foster families dealing with attendance. But we could just open that up to what, they might misunderstand about families dealing with.
What number did you have it under?
That was under 5, under family and caregiver partnership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. You want me to ask the question again?
Yes, please.
Okay. So just in listening to, how we're describing that families sometimes might, I don't know, be a little less trusting, a little defensive when they're thinking about child welfare and attendance, and having people come to my home and check on my child. They probably misunderstand a little bit that you're actually there to support first. You don't really want to get to that point any more than they do. Is there anything that maybe the schools or administrators or teachers, just on the education side might misunderstand as well about, foster families, just families in general dealing with attendance challenges?
Mm-hmm. I know not only our foster youth, but a lot of our parents are kind of in survival mode. Especially foster youth with their trauma backgrounds. A lot of the students are having it like a trauma. They're dealing with an immediate trauma response, right? The students were taken from their family. No matter what the situation, that's still their family. That's still their parent that they love. And they're taken and they're placed with strangers. And so whatever the abuse or neglect was on top of everything else they're dealing with, they've got that trauma response. We also have students that are not in foster care that are dealing with depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And our families are really struggling with how to support their students. And oftentimes students have school refusal. And the parents will say, I just can't get them to school. And, especially as students are older, you can't just pick up your student and put them in the car and get them to school. Sometimes I go to the homes and the students are bigger than their parents.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know what to do. And so it's getting them connected with those resources, whether it be foster care, like wraparound services, or student getting them connected with counseling, either through, their own private insurance or even through our school district. We have options available for them.
Yeah.
Some of our schools even have licensed therapists at them. And so getting them in connection with that support to help deal with that. But when you're at the school level, if you're not at the home or you're not having that communication with the family for whatever reason, you don't see the struggle that's going on and how desperate sometimes the families are. They want the support. They want their student to go to school. They just either don't know how to get them there or have tried everything that they can and it's just not working.
That's interesting. So, you shared when we first started talking that you've been in education for about 27 years. And I know you started off as a teacher, maybe not necessarily focused on attendance, but I would imagine that you've seen some patterns from them till now that have changed a little bit. What do you think is probably one of the most, one of the biggest differences in attendance, child welfare and attendance today than maybe like 25 years ago when we probably weren't even calling it, referring to it that way? Are there any differences now or anything that's gotten more challenging that you can point out?
I think there are definitely higher levels of depression and anxiety amongst
Wow.
our students.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, one of the things that I have noticed, and I don't really know the reason behind it, and it's not a finger pointing or a blaming, but I have come across where it seems like there are some parenting skills um that aren't there or aren't strong enough, or maybe some boundaries about, you know, being a parent versus a friend type thing,
Gotcha.
where the reinforcement of expectations of, you know, consequences, whether positive or negative consequences, um, students aren't being maybe held accountable. And that's not in every family or in every household, but it does come up. And, um, you know, so we'd like to support parents through, you know, different trainings that either are offered through the SELPA or offered through our school district to help them with those things. But
Right.
we have no control over that, right? We can offer it and the parent has to be willing to accept that. But some of those types of things, that makes it difficult because that's totally out of our control.
You know, it's thank you for sharing that, because I had a conversation with my own mother not too long ago where we were talking about the healthy fear kids used to have of their parents. Not fearful, you know, afraid to breathe,
Right.
but you know, a healthy fear, almost like a fear of disappointing them.
Sure.
And how we don't see it like that, you know, really anymore. And the same as I was telling her in the classroom, I remember having a healthy fear of my teacher, this, you know, the kind of the same way that I did of my parents, where I didn't want to disappoint my teacher. You know what I mean? Behavior wise, academically, I looked at it a little different. Whereas now, even in my time in the classroom, kids are equipped with so much more information now that there's more power struggle than I've ever seen before. You know, whether I was a student or in the classroom as the adult, the power struggle is off the charts. And then the adults have a really hard time with how far to go in that struggle, because you're the professional, you're the educator, not the parent. And it gets rough,
Yes.
you know, in there. And so I get what you mean. You know, the skill set, yes, but the environment, the context too is, I mean, just way different than it was, you know, 3 decades ago.
Yes.
So that's got to be challenging, you know, in the classroom. And also during those trainings where you're trying to help, you know, give parents like some confidence in their, you know, their authority as the parent.
Right.
I can't imagine what that feels like right now. I mean, I'm very fortunate, I guess, to not have that type of structure. I'm still a little, you know, have a healthy fear of my mom right now.
Exactly.
I still kind of watch, you know, what I say, how I say it in front of her, even though I'm an adult. In those trainings, do you hear parents saying things like that, or, you know, admitting to those things? Or are they there just kind of confused by why this is such a struggle for them and why they're hearing it that way? Like, what's the response, I guess, you get from parents in that setting?
Well, so like one of the things I like to, so say a student's not attending school.
Yeah.
You know, one of my first questions to the parent is, does a student have a cell phone?
Mm.
And oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, it's yes.
Yes.
And I say, do they have it right now?
Yeah.
Yes. And I said, well, you know, and I try to equate it to, you know, being an adult and having a job. You don't get a paycheck until you go to work and you do your job.
Mhm.
Well, a cell phone is
Privilege.
not a right.
Yeah.
It's a privilege. And so you have certain expectations as a child and as a student that we need you to do. And it's the job of the parent to enforce those things. And so, you know, if they don't go to school, maybe it's they don't get to have their cell phone.
Yeah.
Or they don't get to play their video games, or, you know, because you could go down a whole rabbit hole of like applied behavioral analysis about this, like the function of the behavior and the consequences, you know,
Get what they want.
right. And so like here we are positively reinforcing the fact that they're not going to school. Now we have to compete with that when they do go to school.
Yeah.
Like we're competing with the fact that being at home in your nice comfy bed in your jammies, playing your video games, or, laying in bed, texting your friends late at night. Those are all powerful, powerful reinforcers for kids
Ooh,
these
they
days.
are, yeah.
So being able to compete with that, to try to encourage a student to come to school, is really difficult and takes everybody to be on board. And, being a parent is hard.
Yes.
You are not always their friends,
Right.
sometimes they hate you. And that, that's kind of our job as being a parent is, putting those boundaries in place and holding fast to them.
Yeah.
Because we know as adults that this is in the best interest of our children.
Right.
At the time, the children don't know that. I was the same way when I was a teenager,
Yeah.
but I had that healthy fear or respect for the authority figure, whether that be my parent, my teacher, whoever it is. And I do see that missing. And I don't know, I haven't gotten into the science of like what that's about, but I just know, it is hard being a parent, and you have to have, the willingness to tough it out and to stick to it and be consistent, because the worst thing we can do is not be consistent, because then the kids are smart.
They know. And they pay such close attention, like attention that we don't realize that they're paying.
Mm-hmm. And they know how to manipulate us. I mean, they really do. It's like innate to them. I don't know. And they know, if I wear my mom down, she'll eventually give in to me.
Especially since she's already kind of worn down. Like, she's got a lot going on.
Yeah. She's got, everything, all of her adult problems and issues and things that she has to face on the day-to-day, but then also this challenge of having to get me to school.
Right.
And I'm winning right now.
That's so funny in a not funny way.
No.
Right? Like, it's like ironic funny. Even the conversation about the phone, and I totally agree with you. Those things are privileges, and that's come up with my mom too. And I think what I was trying to not make her understand, but show her the difference was when I was in school, the phone was not even it didn't exist like that. For a kid my age to have a phone, be like, do you have a job? Like, what do you need a phone for? So for her, it wasn't even a matter of parents didn't rely on it themselves, at that time. And now they do. They also rely on the cell phone and are used to relying on it in their own lives for their own things and communication. So now if I take that phone from you, I'm cutting myself off from you too a little bit. And they're not used to having that. Whereas my mom went all day long, 8-9 hours if I had an after school program or activity, without talking to me unless it was an emergency. And then she'd just call the office and say, I need to talk to my kid, or go up there. Mm-hmm. That does not exist anymore. It's kind of unheard of. And so I'm trying to help her to see that. And she's looking at me going, well, everybody needs to get a little tougher. we just need to get over it a little bit. Somebody's going to have to go first, and being tough, and it should be the parent, and she's looking at me, and I agree with her. But you can't ignore the fact that the context has changed so much. So I would imagine you guys probably get some looks, when you're trying to explain that tough love piece. Mm-hmm. There's probably some looks like, yeah, sure, you try it. You know what I mean? You try it and see what happens.
Right.
But I do appreciate that that's part of the training, because it really does come down to that. You're still the parent. You're still the authority. They still should look at you that way. And try it first, before you roll your eyes at me a little bit, kind of like that.
And one of my favorite parent trainings is Parenting with Love and Logic.
Yeah.
Because, it does it in such a loving, compassionate way, but it still allows you to set boundaries and not totally drain yourself as a parent emotionally doing it. And it's pretty simple to enact. So, I am a huge proponent for that parent training.
I like it. And to me, you're also showing your children how to set boundaries.
Yes.
You're modeling for them. So when they become adults, they have their own healthy boundaries in relationships or jobs, or, just how people treat them. It's a skill set you want to give them.
Right.
You want to have that young so that they know how to do that when they are adults. Because I know if I didn't do it and someone was taking advantage of my kid, and I'm going, why didn't you just say no? But I didn't show them that. Right. That would hurt. That would hurt me to my core.
Sure.
So I appreciate that. That is a great training. And if there's any information about that, if anybody's listening, we could probably put that on the website with this episode to show folks how they can get a hold of a Love and Logic training. Okay. I do have kind of a fun thing I want to do, because I imagine that you do see a lot of things. You guys are always working to figure out how you can help folks. And sometimes it might get a little exhausting. So for a second, I just want to kind of play Queen of the World. Okay. And I want you to finish the statement. Okay. If education, child welfare, and courts worked seamlessly together. Now finish the statement.
Okay. We would have consistent, clear communication, know what the rights of students are within each agency, and be able to advocate for them together for seamless transitions.
Wow. As you're saying that, I'm trying to imagine all the different transitions, right? And all the different things. And if we could have it that way, what would you say would be even just a first small step, for districts and families to get to that point?
I think, especially for students in foster care, I know the child welfare system is so overwhelmed and impacted and has a very high turnover rate. And that's kind of where part of the problem and disconnect is, because students may come in with a specific social worker and then the next day it's somebody else. Also kind of setting up that lack of consistency in a relationship for those poor kiddos. But just being able to communicate with the foster youth liaison, if it is changing, just so we all know, just to make sure we all know that what the students' rights are. I have encountered some social workers that aren't aware of the right to school of origin, or, having that communication. I think just communication in general, if we could find a way to do that so much better, we would be able to knock out a lot of the issues that come into play for any of our students, whether it be parent to school, or parent to school district, or parent to teacher. Having that communication, or within our other agencies for like our foster youth and the social workers and the court system, and really understanding what role do each one of us play for this student, and what are our responsibilities to this student, and what are the processes, because I don't know all the processes that Children and Family Services, what they have. And I'll ask because we have a wonderful district, liaison through CFS that answers so many questions for us. They are priceless, their job.
Shout out to them.
Yes, absolutely. They make my job so much easier but they're kind of that bridge to get that communication if they can.
Yeah.
But even the court system, the way they maybe put stuff in court. I don't have a legal background, but yet I'm still required to read court documents, right? Try to interpret them and make sure that we're putting protections in place for students, or only allowing, certain people access to information. But every judge writes those differently. And so, there are so many different little pieces to it. But I think ultimately, if we could find the time in our day to be sure that we're communicating with, even if it's the foster youth liaison at the school, and then we can disseminate that information out to the school sites and to the people that need to know, we could help create more consistency for the students, and make sure that they're staying in placements where they have connection.
I think and throughout our whole conversation, you've said it over and over again, and you hit it on the head, is if we look at it as what we are doing for the student, or for the family, the work we're doing for the student. You've said that over and over again, Renee, and I think if we constantly keep that in the forefront of our minds, that it's not about how many times you've repeated the policy or, explain the legal consequences. It is what are we doing for Athena, for Renee, for their families. I think that's probably like you're explaining right now, if we could just come out the gate with that mentality, it would probably make a world of difference. Just in kind of being a little humble, in that process. But I imagine that seeing it every day, all the time, could not keep us, but kind of stop us from starting our day thinking that, sometimes. But that's a good reminder. And I appreciate you explaining it that way, even in the conversation. And it's not that you're, scripted and saying, you're just naturally saying for the student, because that's where you see it coming from. And I appreciate that. I'm sure your district appreciates you for that. I'm sure they could shout you out right now too for a lot of things that you've helped with. I want to thank you for sitting down with me today. There was a lot that I learned about CWA that I did not know, and some things that I would like to share with others, just that, my own personal life on how they can look at it. And I'm sure that there's some families who would give you a big hug right now, if they could. And thank you as well.
Thank you.
No problem. You should come back, maybe bring somebody else from the district next time, see if we could sit down and talk to them too.
Anytime. You let me know.
Before we wrap up, we want to remind you that if you or someone you know is facing a crisis, help is available. You are not alone. If it's an emergency, please call 911. For immediate support, you can reach out to the Crisis and Suicide Hotline by dialing 988. Remember, taking the first step to ask for help is a sign of strength. Stay safe, take care of yourself, and take care of each other. Until next time, be well.
In this episode of Fostering Futures, Athena continues the Foster series with Mark Toddhunter, Behavioral Health Counselor Supervisor at Desert Mountain Children's Center. Together, they dive into the mental health realities of foster youth, exploring trauma, grief, identity, emotional regulation, and the power of stable, caring relationships. A powerful conversation on healing, attachment, and how one consistent adult can change a child's future. Don't miss this impactful episode.
See you next time.